but it's easy to do that when you first get involved with DISC, and you can use these when you're doing a workshop. Who recognizes these people?
Yep, I do.
Pardon me?
Yes, I recognize them.
All right. Well, one of the tests is tell me who this guy is. So we have the 4 Ps, and again, these are what we call core behavioral styles. Most of these people, and again, their characters or their acting personalities are what we call, core styles, one color above the energy line. So let me just sort of, put another graphic up here. Again, the Ds, active in solving problems. Low Ds prefers, a more calculated, thoughtful approach. Is tends to seek out people, verbally persuasive. Low Is, again, more reserved, careful, sometimes pessimistic. Tom Hanks, when his role as Captain Phillips in the movie, as a highest person, wants a stable, predictable, not overly emotional, following the rules, following the procedures, and then, his whole life gets changed when these pirates when they hijack his ship. Low S, fast-paced, unstructured. High C, follow the rules. Low C, who needs rules? So those are some of the big characteristics of the 4 temperaments, the 4 behavioral styles. Now, I would recommend, and I'm going to sort of cover some of the other characteristics here in more detail, and then we're going to ask some questions. But I think one of the handouts, hopefully it was on the website or on your CD or on page 10 of your report, your DISC report, has these behavioral characteristics. And if you had a photographic memory, it'd be great if you can just memorize this, because this is let me get my pen here. This is what we call the energy line, the 50% line. And these are the behavioral characteristics on being above the line or below the line. And just what I want you to do throughout the next course is feel free to look at this. And if you have page 10 or you have that handout, keep it right in front of you. This is also in the textbook, in chapter 5. But for example, high D is going to be some of these behavioral characteristics. A low I is going to have these characteristics. And low S, hypertensive. And high S is, you're going to see these behavioral characteristics, and on and on. All right, so before we start talking about the 4 characteristics, or the characteristics of the 4 behavioral styles, any questions so far?
I don't have any.
I think I'm with you.
Oh, great. All right, so let's talk about some famous personalities in more detail. Anybody remember this guy? What's his name? A Few Good Men.
Nathan Jessup.
Oh, thank you. You can read my slide. You're very good.
I know that movie. I know that one.
Oh, did you? And when we talk about high Ds, Hillary Clinton, she tries to appear as a high I, but anytime she's under, she just has those high D tendencies versus, Bill Clinton, who's a high I. Rosie O'Donnell, Nathan Jessup from A Few Good Men. And the interesting about, sometimes with D's, including myself, is when they put Nathan Jessup on the trial and Tom Hanks is just banging away with questions. Did you do this? Why did you do that? Why did you? And he just comes back and says, you can't handle the truth. And that's sometimes what high D's might do, depending on what their I score is. So that's sort of some exaggerated behavioral, exaggerated famous personalities of the D's. One of my favorite books I read was, from the shipwreck, Ernest Shackleton, when his boat is just, stuck in the ice. And this was his want ad when he first was looking for employees to go on this journey. So the question is, safe return, doubtful. I want to know, how many of you think there were a lot of high D's on that journey? Because this is what motivates a lot of D's. It's a challenge. It's an opportunity to do things that, other people don't do. So here's some characteristics, and you're going to see this again. This is right out of the textbook. And the important factors to understand about some D's is, well, we talked about the emotion, their strengths. They're good visionary people. They see the strategic, they see the vision of the organization. Sometimes they're not very good with small details. And, the D's like to control, direct, and they like to win. Now, the interesting thing is they don't necessarily, they may compete with other people because, when you put a very high D in a team, sometimes they don't like to play ball with people because they hate wasting their time. But most of them compete with themselves. They hold themselves up and they start and initiate a lot of things, but sometimes they don't ever finish it. Now, this is a good friend of mine. He's an attorney, and you look at his office walls. What do you see? He has every diploma, everything from Boy Scouts, and we're both Eagle Scouts, and we're in Rotary, we both are in the military, and we're probably very similar in a lot of things, but he has everything on his wall because it makes him feel successful, because high D's compete with achieving and solving tasks and going to the next level. And many times, when you hear them speak, they talk about winning and being bored in meetings and let's get this done and let's move on. And, again, great starters, sometimes not good finishers. And they just want everything, pointed to the bottom line. Anybody know anybody like that? So here's the eyes is Bill Clinton, of course. People, he's probably the most popular ex-president we've ever had in this country. I was in New Zealand doing a workshop, and this was many years ago when he was just left the presidency, and everybody was, in New Zealand just were amazed with the Clintons, and they say, well, why did you re-elect them for the third time? Oh gosh, no. But anyway, the high I people, outgoing, friendly, they never never meet a stranger, everybody's a friend, and they have great strengths. Now, I'm just going to sort of give you a quick thing. If you have your textbook, we're going to jump ahead to chapter 4 and just let you know where all this information is in case you're bored late at night and you need to read something in the textbook. But, look at just, 74, page 74 talks about the high I. And there's a yellow box on page 74. It talks about being enthusiastic, trusting, charming, popular, all great descriptors that we'd all like to have. And then let's talk about the characteristics, because when you go to the exam, you're going to see graphs. You're not going to see photographs of people. You're going to see graphs, and the D is this way, the I is that way. And when you're describing these graphs, you need to give me, the characteristics represented by that person's temperament. And one thing about the I's that sometimes gets them in trouble on page 77, as well as here, is they have this need to be liked. And many times they have this need, like to be popular and to be liked. They don't want to hurt people's feelings. While the D's, they don't care about anybody's feelings, right? But the I's is they have this need to be liked. And sometimes they're not very good disciplinarians and holding people's feet to the fire, but they're a whole lot of, fun to be around. So they have to interact. It's like if you hire a high I and say you put them in a cubicle by themselves, they're going to have to get out and talk to people. And, so that's just, something to keep in mind. And again, page 80, 81 is sort of a more exploded version of what you see on this slide. Optimistic. And again, the fear, the opposite, not being liked. And if you're also as a high I, sometimes you can be, depending on your S score, a little bit disorganized. So anyway, that's the I people that we were talking about. Let's talk about the S's. S is steady, consistent. The focus is pace and activity. And it's about S's is that they have this need to serve other people, and they want to work for a leader and a cause, and their S's are people-oriented people, if they're high S's, that is. However, they don't like change. They want to have the status quo. They want to make sure everything's done right. They're thorough. They like everything in writing. Now, I can say this because, my wife isn't here right now, and my wife runs my business, and she is 100% SC. And you sort of know what I am, right? Someone take a guess. What do you think I am? Or what combination am I?
A DI.
Miriam, you're a brilliant analyzer. What do you think my S score is?
Probably fairly low.
Oh boy, you already passed the exam. All right, no. So yeah, you're right. I'm a DI. I'm a low S, and my C is like 50%. So I know where the rules are, and I know when to break them, and I know when to follow the rules. But yeah, I'm a D over I. I'm a higher D than I am an I. And I'm married, Kathy. We met in college. It was love at first sight. And we're polar opposites. She's 100% SC, and I'm over there on the left of the graph. And she's all about following the rules. She's an accountant too. And she's all about details and following the rules and doing things right, and don't ever offend anybody, and never stand in front of anybody and be, public. And I'm totally opposite. So as a marriage, as a partnership, we're very well balanced. But we have conflict because we're very different to each other. And the S's and the C's are sort of like this. Cameron, this guy, we used to take Boy Scouts on sailing trips from Miami to the Bahamas and back, and Cameron was the first mate. He's a high S. The thing about, and I'm telling you the story because, this is going to be part of the test here, is high S's are non-emotional. They don't get excited and verbal and assertive like D's or DI people do. And people like that because, well, you know, you don't want your leader to be yelling and screaming like Donald Trump. And Cameron had this personality that's just, you know, easy, steady, and everybody looked up to that. So we made him first mate. Now, the other thing you need to remember is sometimes if you're a high D, or, you know, you could perceive those SCs as just timid, and like I said, you know, I used to think if they weren't like me, they were defective. And if you do that, and here's a point when you're debriefing people on your reports or doing a workshop, you have to teach those DIs how to communicate with the SCs, or they're just going to run over the top of them or take advantage of them. And then you're leaving all that talent that a SC brings, you know, on the table, because they're not going to challenge you. So, you know, they hate conflict. They want to follow the rules. And the one thing is they're super high family oriented. Doesn't mean a D, I, and C don't like family, but their high S's are just much more dedicated to their family in a smaller group of people versus the high I's. It's everybody. So everybody, you got that? And it's right, they're the glue that holds it together. I couldn't survive without my wife, you know, who's so good at handling all the details, and you know, maybe you all talk to her when you registered for this class. So here, HighC's. Anyone watch Shark Tank?
I've seen it recently.
Well, I love it because, you know, it's so bottom line, and they're very business oriented, and it's not usual fluff that you see on reality shows. But Damon John, this is him. He created FUBU, and he's one of the Shark Tank people who decides if these entrepreneurs get money or not. And he's typical HighC, you know, analytical. He is bottom line. His bottom line, he will never make an investment on someone who's all about enthusiasm and happy-go-lucky. He's looking at, can I make money in that investment? And, you know, and here, I didn't ask you, who knows who this is?
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's Mr. Carson. Now, obviously, you haven't watched Downton Abbey.
Yeah.
And he's the head butler, and he's all about following the rules and ensuring there's no fraternization and compliance with tradition in this fictional English manner where there's royalty or aristocrats on the top floor and servants on the bottom. And he just represents the old paradigm in the early 1900s in England. And here's the one thing that many think it stands out with HighC's. You know, we talk about them being fearful, and the one thing is they will tend to back down if they're ever challenged in public, in many cases, if they have a low D particular. So those are the C's. You know, want to improve things, follow the rules. Low C's, the opposite, as we discussed. And that tend to back down if ever challenged in public. So anyway, any questions so far?
No. Yep.
Okay, so let's talk about the ideal job culture for the 4 factors, and then we'll have our little pop quiz, and maybe we'll finish a little bit early today. And let me just say while we're on the phone, is since there's just 2 of us, and sometimes there's 4 or 5 in my classes, you know, if you have, during this whole period that we're going through training, you have my attention. If you need to email me, ask questions, or call me if you have questions, that's certainly, my door is open to you on anything related to what we've been talking about. Now, the high D's, Again, things they like is status and prestige. We talked about my buddy, the attorney who had all his diplomas. It doesn't mean all high Ds are going to have status symbols in their office, but many do. They like challenges. They're good at thinking outside the box, not necessarily good at doing all the details. They tend to over delegate to people, and competitive in change. So let's look at the I's. Good about social interactions. Poor Robin Williams, I was so devastated when he passed away. Good at communicating. People oriented. They don't like, depending how high that I score, don't like all the details. And the other thing, many with high I's, is they're really good at generating new ideas. And however, you got to have those S's and C's to complete those ideas. So those, ideal job culture for the I. Now we also realize that most of us aren't just pure I's. We all have differences. We have some D, some I, some S, and some C. So the S's is, again, they're team oriented. They want to have a good support structure. They get frustrated if they don't have good leaders who are conscientious. They like things in writing. Who wouldn't? Want to work. They don't like conflict. Want to work in a friendly environment when there's limited conflict, and they're motivated to serve other people. So someone tell me, what is the unique similarity? What do Mother Teresa and Mr. Roger have in common? Anybody know?
I have no idea.
Yes, you do. Both of them are passed away. Oh, I'm sorry. That's a bad joke. The all right. So you have to keep you all awake. So and then for the C's is, an analytical approach, love to follow rules and procedures, want to have quality control, and don't rush them, because